Welcome everyone. This is Andre's Restart, and tonight we're gonna have a quick little stream talking about this Metroid Prime 4 situation and whatever else you guys bring up in the chat. It's a Q&A stream where I have more a consistent dynamic back and forth with you guys. And yeah, that's the general plan. It is gonna be short stream, like an hour. Basically just because I'm running off like barely any sleep right now. And so I'm doing something today because I felt like I should do a early week stream. Normally I do them on Monday nights. Sometimes I do them on Tuesdays when something happens, like tonight. And yesterday what happened was, well, the internet in my neighborhood went out again the entire day. So, I mean, it came back late last night. And so I couldn't do the podcast or any sort of live stream last night. But also at the same time, I would say the news has been a little light. I mean, well, sort of light. Like the news is decent last week, but we covered it last week already to some extent. So there wasn't really a need to kind of do it over again. But thanks to Super Metal Day 64, we have some interesting discoveries with Metroid Prime 4. And I think it puts some things into better context about what I've talked about in the past. But also, it looks like there might be a little bit of a cover-up going on here, hence the title of the stream. And that's kind of interesting. Does it mean much? Maybe not. Maybe so. But we're going to talk about it. And I think it's going to be a fun little discussion we're going to have tonight. But let me check in with the chat. I'm sorry if I look terrible. I'm very tired. Like my eyes hurt. Like I'm that kind of tired that I can tell my body needs to sleep, but I also can't sleep. Not because I have things to do. Like obviously I consider this, responsibility, but I also got to eat later. But like excluding like things I need to do, like even if I had nothing to do, if I could just lie down in bed, I don't think I would fall asleep, even though I know my body needs to sleep and I feel that kind of like physical pain and exhaustion right now. So it's a weird little, I guess, limbo I'm in. But I'm sure after the stream, I'm gonna go get food. I'm gonna eat a whole bunch of food. I've been going to the gym a lot lately. And by a lot, I mean the last 4 days. So my body needs the fuel, and then I'll probably go to sleep shortly after that. And then tomorrow will be a new day, and tomorrow I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow, but tomorrow I'm sure we'll sort things out. It's gonna be fun then as well. But yeah, let's check into the chat. As it's Q&A stream, right? And I'll be going through different things you guys bring up, and then eventually I'll get into this Metroid stuff. So, pulling up the chat here. By the way, please let me know if everything looks and sounds okay. Okay enough. And hopefully sounds fine. Anthony Smith, hello there. Kieran Buckley, I know this is 99.99% not going to happen, but wouldn't it be best for Nintendo to include a Switch reveal at the end of a Nintendo Direct? That's an interesting point of view, Kieran. And I don't know if that would be best. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but it's not an idea that I've really been entertaining. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying, I haven't heard other people suggest it before. I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen. And I think the main reason why, I mean, like, it would be cool, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it would be really cool to have an event, something like that announced in a Direct by surprise, right? Like a surprise announcement. But just the way I anticipate the Nintendo Directs to go, it doesn't seem like something Nintendo would do. And also, I think they want to be very careful with their messaging, right? So every time we have a Nintendo Direct, they kind of give us expectations for what there will be. Obviously, there'll be some surprise announcements, but they, for the most part, fall in line with what they say. Oh, these games will be focused on the spring. These games will be focused on the summer and the fall. Things like that, right? And sometimes we'll get a few little extra details or nuggets. And sometimes we do get stuff beyond just game announcements, right? Like they do things like that. I think like last year they had made mention of was it last year or the year before? It's all a blur at this point, but like we had gotten like the mention of like the Zelda anniversary Game and Watch. Nintendo has said things about the park and things like that, and even in the Mario movie cast, right? Like that was in a direct. At the same time, we've had dedicated Mario movie directs, right? We've had, did we have a Nintendo World direct as well? I think we did, but I'm not certain. I would double check that. It's again, it's all a blur for me right now. But I guess my ultimate point is there's things that they could do it, right? Like I don't think it's completely out of the question, but I don't think it's a safe expectation. I think we should not expect that either because Nintendo hasn't really operated that way. Like you look at the OLED announcement, the Switch Lite announcement; those were revisions, and they were announced separately, and the messaging was very clear. And the same thing with the Switch itself; it was not announced in a direct; it was announced separately. And I think part of that is for the messaging. They want the messaging to be clear as possible. Now, obviously, you could have the surprise announcement at the end of a Nintendo Direct, and then the trailer goes public, and there you go. But then that trailer would be coming out alongside a whole bunch of games trailers on that same day. I think they would want to have the messaging very clear and the focus to be just on Switch 2 for that day. Now, could there be games that are in discussion about Switch 2 at the same time? Yes, but the main point is Switch 2. And so if you have a Nintendo Direct that has a whole bunch of Switch stuff first, right? Like the first series of announcements until the end, then it's different. Now, I'm not saying there can't be a Switch 2 Direct, right? But it would be a Switch 2 Direct. It would be a dedicated Switch 2 Direct. That would be the point. Like maybe Nintendo says, post on social media, hey, tune in a day and a half from now or next week or what have you for a special focused Nintendo Direct about our next generation console, the successor to the Nintendo Switch. And so that is something I could see them doing potentially instead of like a live presentation or a trailer. Like they could do a direct that includes kind of those things. But for example, we get a normal February Nintendo Direct, I don't think they're going to put the trailer at the end because I think that is not the most clear messaging and it's not the best way to get word out there so people understand what's coming next. And so that's why I don't think it would happen. But would it be exciting? It definitely would be exciting. But I guess I kind of understand where you're coming from, though, because let's say we get this February Direct and there's no mention of anything Switch 2 at all. Like, what could they put in there? If it is indeed a plan that Switch 2 is going to be like the big focus for Nintendo's second half of this year, and a lot of the big games are kind of centered around that, like, what can they show in a February Direct that would make it worth watching? More details in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door and Luigi's Mansion 2 would be nice, but those are games that have already been out for years, right? We're just getting better versions of them. We could learn a little bit more about Princess Peach Showtime. And so, when I kind of think about what there's still left for Nintendo to tell us, if they're only going to tell us about things for the first half of the year with this next Direct and not mention Switch 2, then I'm kind of thinking that we just get a Direct Mini. I could be wrong. Because, maybe Nintendo does decide, for example, to show off Metroid Prime 4 in the next Nintendo Direct. And that's kind of like their end of show banger. And it still comes out for Switch 2, but they don't really talk about that in this Direct. Right? They talk about Princess Peach Showtime again, Mario vs. Donkey Kong again. They give us a Splatoon 3 DLC announcement. They give us a date for Luigi's Mansion 2, a date for Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, maybe announce Wind Waker, Twilight Princess HD. Then at the end of the show, be like, oh, Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are coming out. Maybe they shall drop Metroid Prime 2. They'll say maybe Metroid Prime 3 will come at a later date, and then they'll say we have one more message to show you, and it's a trailer for Metroid Prime 4, and they say holiday 2024 or something. Like that would be a good direct. Obviously, I'm assuming third party stuff as well will be kind of mixed in there. Like that would be a good direct. They could do that, but they also could save Prime 4 alongside the big reveal for Switch 2. So I think it's one or the other, right? I think we get a Switch Mini. I mean, a Switch Mini. No. I think we get a direct mini in February, maybe. And then a little bit later, we get like a presentation talking about Switch 2, and there are some games there, including Prime 4 and 3D Mario. Or we have a direct that's full that includes Prime 4 at the end, talking about it being a big release towards the later in this year. And then a few months later, we do get the Switch 2 presentation, and there we get the confirmation that it's a cross-gen title. That it's one of those two avenues I sort of see. But moving on here, Varan Verby asks, will Andre show Ruby off tonight? I don't know. The stream is going to be shorter than usual. I am very tired, and if Ruby comes into the room, I will show her. If she does not come into the room, I'm going to let her do her thing. She was actually stretching out like right there on the floor right before I went live, but then I went to go get water, and then she left. So we'll see what happens. I feel like the lighting in this room is a little off. Probably. Yeah, maybe it's the black I'm wearing. I'm not sure. Chuck Eck, Metroid Prime 4 reveal in 2024. It's happening. I can feel it in my bones. I feel it in my it's about damn time thought process. But I'm with you. I'm definitely with you. All right, so we got a few little things to point out here. We got Free Metroid Hat has joined as a YouTube member. Welcome. I'm very happy to have you aboard. Thank you for joining. I will point out there are some special emojis for members. I added a few weeks ago. I'll be adding a few more. Maybe some Metroid themed ones. DW for Smash has also renewed their membership. Thank you for sticking around. I very much appreciate it. And Free Metroid Hat has provided a super chat as well. Thank you very much for the super chat. And this is what Free Metroid Hat has to say. If Metroid Prime 4 has multiplayer, what beings will be there? Will there be, you think, and characters can we play as, or can we make our own custom characters? It's a very interesting question. I do kind of think we're going to get multiplayer for Metroid Prime 4 at this point. I think there is mounting evidence, and I may talk more about this in a later video. But even like in Super Metal Days video from yesterday, the person that kind of was Edwin Atwell, like they did playtesting for prior Call of Duty games, which are big multiplayer shooters. And we've seen a lot of hirings for big multiplayer for people that have a history with big multiplayer shooters. And so when I think about that, when I think about the history of Metroid having multiplayer shooting, like Metroid Prime Hunters and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and also with how much ambition seems to be going into this game, and what I'm going to assume is an expectation for this game to succeed to some extent, I have a suspicion Nintendo may want to kind of push multiplayer on this game. So I think that there could be that there. And again, I say that with the assumption that the single player is totally fine. It's still a masterful campaign. It's not, the multiplayer wouldn't take away from the single player. Like it's in addition. And so I do kind of think there will be multiplayer, right? We'll see what they actually do, but how they go about doing that, that's an entirely different conversation. One thought I have is like, what if instead of playing as Samus or some other hunter, we play as a Federation trooper? I think that'd be kind of cool. That could maybe perhaps level the playing field a little bit, but at the same time, people may want to play as Samus. And so how do they go about handling multiplayer there. I mean, you have Metro Prime Hunters, right, where they had multiple different hunters, and when and that's kind of an interesting way to do it because then the game may feel more like a hero shooter, right? And so you have these different characters that have their own different abilities, their own weapons, and so there's variety there. And so when you're squatting up, maybe you think about different characters you put together. And I guess the interesting challenge with that one is can they create just a whole bunch of different style of hunters and mix them into the multiplayer? And if so, does that tie into the single player in any way? Um, and that's where I'm not certain on how they'll go about doing it. I think there's a lot of ways they could handle multiplayer, right? Like I said, if you could do a standardized Federation trooper, I think having everyone be Samus would be weird. Um, Having different styles of hunters that you could pick would be cool. And I guess what's interesting about that one is like, let's say that like they don't even worry about like how the hunters apply to the single player. Like it's just not a thing, right? Like maybe obviously Samus, Silex, maybe there's a couple other things to the story, but they just have hunters. Like, they have maybe like a character bio, what have you, and they just kind of create certain characters. And maybe every few months there's a new season of DLC for Metro Prime 4 where they include new hunters and new stages and new challenges. And that's just what they do. And doesn't really tie into single player at all. It's just two separate things. And so if they did something like that, I think that would work. I wonder how people would feel about it not connecting to the single player. I personally, I mean, if it, a bit, it's almost like we're kind of asking for two things in one here, like two games in one. You have a single player and you have the multiplayer. Which, if you look at the Call of Duty games are basically three games in one. You have the multiplayer, you have the horde mode, and then you have the single player. So they could do something like that. Now, I'll say that in the case of Metroid Prime, the single player would be a much bigger deal than the single player is in Call of Duty. The single player would be, a whole adventure, right? Like a 30, 40, 50-hour adventure, if not more. And so with that, I would assume that's kind of the big focus, and they wouldn't need to have that much extra. But the multiplayer, I guess that's just like me thinking on it, kind of like speaking it out. I feel like doing different hunters would be the most fun, but I'm also open to them just kind of having a set Federation trooper style, and you can kind of customize them, kind of like to how you suggested. There's some customization, and over time you can kind of change them up, change out different weapons, different abilities, a lot of which are relatable to abilities you have in the main campaign. The only problem with that is if you can't actually play as Samus, people might not like that. So that brings me back to the Hunter idea where people can play as Samus, but then there are all these other characters that would be different as well. So I don't know. There's some options there. I'll also say, just thinking about it a little bit more, like Metro Prime 2 had a lot of different power-ups that were temporary. And so maybe they throw that in there. That would make it very party-esque, and I don't know if they want to do that. But it would be kind of cool to like temporarily have like the phase-on beam, for example, which would be overpowered, but it's only temporary. I mean, maybe that could be like a special. Maybe each hunter has their own special where they can have a super powerful beam, or there's some sort of special tactic that they can do, very much like a hero shooter. So I keep circling back to the hero shooter idea. So maybe that's what they do. I mean, Metro Prime Hunters was pretty good for the Nintendo DS back in the day. So making something like that modern, but also have the masterpiece campaign, maybe that's the way to go. All right, moving on here. Giancarlo, you're saying you don't expect to see a Metro Prime 4 until a Switch successor presentation blowout. I think we could maybe see it in a teaser. But I understand where you're coming from. Like I'm a bit divided on this, on how they're gonna show it. Like, are they gonna show Prime 4 in a direct first, and it has a blowout trailer, or do we wait until Switch 2 is literally shown off? There's a small teaser there, and then we have a dedicated Prime 4 trailer. That's tough. Hello there, Wiley Tiger. Hello there, Adam Rohn. Hello there, Jakob Sahin. Hello there, Having Hope. Hello there, Salfrena or Silfrena. Let's see here. Jean Carl, you're predicting the Metroid Prime 4 campaign length will be 12 or 20 hours. I think it's going to be bigger than that. Yeah. I know normal Metroid games would fall in that range, but I think Metroid Prime 4 is a bigger game. So I'm thinking 30 to 40 hours, if not more. I don't think it's going to be like a 100-hour campaign unless you try to do every little thing. But yeah, I think it's going to be bigger than 12 to 20. I think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be significantly bigger and more content rich than any prior Metroid game by a sizable margin. Yeah. I think the long development time, the restart, everything we've sort of seen about this, I think that there's a lot of ambition being put behind this, and I think that there's correlation between ambition and size and also length. Not necessarily, but that's my estimation. Another super chat here from Adam Ginther. Thank you for the super chat. Or is it Ginther or Ginther? Let me know. But Adam asks, do you think Switch 2 will have 4K output? This would give them incentive to sell a new dock. So interestingly, I believe the OLED dock technically has 4K output capabilities. The Switch itself can't really muster that. I think, for example, like it's the dock would support 4K streaming, or the Switch itself would support 4K streaming. But no games obviously support anything beyond 1080p on Switch, and 1080p is not hit very often with most of their games. Switch 2, I think it will 100% support 4K output. I think this is a system that will have capability to fully work with modern televisions. It's interesting you bring up the dock, because I think it's possible they could just use the same dock from the OLED, but not likely. I think we are going to get some type of new dock. I think it is going to be changed around. Regardless, though, however they do it, I do think that there will be 4K output for the Switch 2. Now, when I say that, that's not me saying that I think every game is going to run in 4K, but it's an option that developers will have, and on a case-by-case basis, we may see that. Like, I imagine a lot of simple games will be easily able to run in 4K. A lot of 2D style games, a lot of indie games. But for the bigger AAA games, they may not shoot for 4K. They may have other ideas in mind, but they will have the option. So that is my expectation. TYG. I remember the sniper guy in Hunters. I remember him too. The red one. Yeah, he was cool. I don't remember the name though. Zalado. Hi, Andres. I know it's off topic, but you know what hasn't been talked about? Is that Switch 2 is going to be the first console without a WADA. Well, I guess technically Switch was, right? But a WADA helped plan Switch, right? The NX. So I understand your point there. Yeah. It is interesting, right? Like, I think there's a lot of business minds at work here when it comes to Switch 2. And so we may see a slightly different direction. Yeah. It's interesting, actually, that you bring this up, because there's something that happened. Was it this morning or late last night? I had a tough time sleeping last night, hence partially why I have the sleep exhaustion. But I'm trying to look up something. There was someone of worthy of note said that I found compelling. Yep, here it is. Okay. Let me share this with you guys. I think some of you people may be familiar with this person. So yeah, this is very, very early morning or late last night, however you choose to interpret that. But Chris Scullion, from an actual editor from VGC News, said this, and I found it interesting. It's something that I kind of agree with. So Chris says, I see that Super Nintendo Switch is trending, and while I personally like to see that name, I think it would be madness business wise. This is a company that had people confused about whether Wii U was a new console or an add on. Make it Switch 2, don't mess about. One of the main reasons PlayStation does so well is because it's obvious to the mainstream, the people who don't read gaming news sites every day, that when the number goes up, that's the next console. PS1, PS2, PS3. It's much easier to get than Xbox 360, One, and X. Make it Switch 2. And so, from a messaging perspective, I 100% agree that Switch 2 would just be so clear, and it would leave nothing up for debate. It would, if you're confused, then you don't know, then you're probably not buying video game systems, like if you don't understand what Switch 2 means. And so I do think that would probably be the safest way to have the most accurate messaging. And so there is a part of me that thinks Nintendo will call Switch 2 Switch 2. That said, a counter argument that many would provide is that that's just not what Nintendo does. You look at their history, that's just not what they do. But as we were discussing, this is different leadership with Nintendo now. Things change, the times change. And so to expect Nintendo to follow the same patterns, the same habits under different leadership forever, eventually that patterns will break. And I think Nintendo struck gold with the Switch. I honestly think the Switch is the best Nintendo has ever done. In terms of putting everything together at the right time. I think they struck gold here. They found the formula where they can have consistent success. The Switch is a home console and a handheld. It's one of their most successful handhelds ever. It's one of their most successful home consoles ever. It's just one of the most successful systems, period. Games sell so well in the system, and it's set up in a way where Nintendo can do its own thing, right? Like they're not. Yes, they are competing with PlayStation. Yes, they're competing with Xbox. They're competing with Steam and what have you. Of course, everyone's competing for the dollar, right? Like people have money and only a certain amount of money, so they're going to choose to invest it how they please, right? And so if someone decides to buy a PS5 one month, they're probably not going to have budget for a Switch 2, right? So obviously there is competition, but at the same time they are differentiating themselves, right? And so a lot of people who care more about having like the big, fidelity home console experience, they may focus on a PS5. But for people who just care to play games and Nintendo games and having the most comfortable form factor, they're going to go for Switch 2. Like there is a difference there. And so I think that benefits Nintendo. So yeah, I kind of feel that Nintendo has a really good formula here. That's the basic point. And I think they want to continue with that. So, and we've already heard from different reports that the system is likely to be iterative, not revolutionary. And what that means is that there may not be a feature that's so pivotal, that's so important and game changing, pun intended there, that they need to market it as the big hook for the console. And so I think Switch 2 is honestly a legitimate option. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be 100% because there's a number of possibilities, and maybe there is a gimmick or innovation in there that Nintendo kind of positions their messaging around that's still suggestive of next gen, that still has clear messaging, and they can get away with that. That could totally be the case. But yeah, I think people that are just assuming it won't be Switch 2, I'm not saying they're wrong, but they may not be right either. Let me find the chat here. Ooh. I did not expect this. We have 130 people watching for a Metroid Prime 4 stream. Honestly, I was thinking that, Metroid a little niche, the stream wouldn't be that popping. But thank you everyone for showing up. I appreciate that. That's super awesome. Cool stuff. I mean, I do think once Nintendo shows Prime 4, a lot of people are gonna be paying a lot more attention to this game. I believe in this game. Joy CJ, I'm not as well versed on Metroid, however. If Nintendo was going to make a FPS that's edgy, Metroid is a good testing ground. I mean, Metroid's probably the edgy Nintendo series. I don't know if edgy is the right word I would like to use, but I certainly understand what you're getting at. And maybe they could position that. Like Metroid has a lot of dark themes. It's not. It can be very colorful, but it's definitely going for more mature tones and themes there, and it can be creepy, right? It's not for everyone, and that is part of the problem with Metroid and its sales potential. But there are tons of games that are rated M that sell incredibly well, so it isn't like there isn't an audience out there to get Metroid to have strong sales. Carcoon, oh, I didn't realize I was not subscribed yet. Sorry, I just fixed. Hope you make it to your goal. I appreciate that. If you enjoy my content, subscribe. But, if you're just a passerby, that's totally fine too. Aaron Raz has joined as a member. Thank you for joining as a member. I very much appreciate that. Glad to have you aboard. Let me see here. What was I? Adam Gunther, right? So it's pronounced as Gunther, like gun. Got it. All right, moving on here. He gave me 40-hour Prime game. That would be insane. I mean, yeah, maybe 40. I mean, maybe I'm getting a little zealous. Because Metroid games are kind of designed to be very replayable. But I do feel good in saying it's going to be a longer, bigger campaign than prior Metroid games. And then, the speedrun community may find ways to play the games quicker, right? So, that's still definitely possible. Nishwick Pops, hello there. What's up? I've been playing Prime 2 since I'm back in the Metroid mood. Oh, nice. Metroid Prime 2, a man of culture, I see. Super Chris added me. Andres, what's your favorite Metroid game? It's Metroid Prime Pinball. That's a joke. It's not Metroid Prime Pinball. I love Metroid Prime Pinball. I think it's one of the best spin-offs ever, one of the best pinball games ever. But is it the best Metroid game? No, it's not. It's one of the worst. But one of the worst for Metroid is still pretty good. My favorite Metroid game, I think it's Metroid. It's Metroid Prime 1. Like that is the answer. It may feel like a cop-out obvious answer, but it is Metroid Prime 1. That is it. That was Metroid Prime 1 was my first Metroid game. So when I had a Nintendo GameCube, my first two games were Super Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, and that's where I fell in love with the series. I have enjoyed most other Metroid games, though. I've played Metroid 1. I've dabbled with Metroid 2, the original, but I have not beaten that one. I have played the remake on 3DS, though. And I love Metroid Samus Returns. That's amazing. Super Metroid, played and beaten. I did beat Samus Returns as well. Metroid Fusion, I've played and beaten. I love those 2D games. Metroid Dread is my favorite 2D Metroid game. I'll point that out. One of my favorite Switch games. It is so good. But my favorite Metroid game, period, it is Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Technically, I've never beaten Metroid Prime 2. I've beaten Quadraxis, but I've gotten stuck at the keys. And so I'm hoping with some sort of port or remaster of Prime 2, I can finally finish it on Switch. I could technically play it on my Wii U, but I ain't going to do that. It's too much work. So yeah, but I love all the Metroid games. I even like Metroid Other M. Yeah, I know. I'm crazy. I like that game. I don't like the story, I don't like the Where's Waldo moments where you have to point with the Wii remote looking for something on screen for 10 hours because you can't find it. But like the core gameplay, the boss fights, the moving around, the mechanics like that's good. I do wish they had just mapped it to normal controls and just had like a button to switch your perspective as opposed to having to hold the Wii remote in classic mode and flipping like that to go into first person. But it was a really cool idea. I just think the execution needed a little bit more fine tuning. Nishquick, I have started AM2R, but then I just played Samus Returns. It would be neat to go back to that, though. Having Hope asks, Andres, what Metro game do you recommend to play first to get into the franchise? That's a good question. Basically, there's two different styles of Metroid, right? Other M's kind of like a weird hybrid, but you have 2D Metroid and you have first-person 3D adventure Metroid, right? So if we're talking about what you should play to get into Metroid Prime, well, I mean, I said Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime, right? You play the original Metroid Prime to get into 3D Metroid. If we're talking about 2D Metroid, I think it's a tougher question to ask because we don't have a modern entry of the original Metroid. However, I believe they can add that soon in a Metroid Zero Mission on Nintendo Switch Online. And so I guess I would debate between either trying Metroid Zero Mission, which is a remake of the original Metroid, which it's a Game Boy Advance game, or you play Metroid Dread because it's a modern 2D Metroid. I guess the challenge I have with this in terms of thinking about what's the best game to play for someone first time getting into this series is just none of these games are easy. First off, right? Like it's not an easy series, but just because it's not easy doesn't mean you can't get into it, right? And Dread, I think, is a really good game, but it's an even better game when you understand the history. You don't need it, but it makes it all the more satisfying. And so that's what kind of makes you consider, oh, should someone play Metroid Zero Mission first before playing Metroid? Like maybe you play all the 2D Metroid games in order, like Zero Mission, then Samus Returns, ideally, right? If that was available. Then you play Super Metroid, then you play Metroid Fusion, then you play Metroid Dread. So that story-wise, that would probably be the best way to do it. But realistically, if you're just looking for fun gameplay, 2D wise, yeah, I mean, try any of the 2D. You could play. I guess the other interesting thing is that you can try any Metroid at any point. Super Metroid actually might be a. Yeah, if you can't do Zero Mission and you don't want to do Dread first, try Super Metroid because Super Metroid is a good way to introduce you to the series. But in terms of the Prime games, definitely Metroid Prime 1. Connor, hey Andres, do you think Kirby Triple Deluxe, Kirby Planet Robobot, and Tomodachi Life should come out on the home console just like how they did with Miitopia on Switch? I don't think we've seen our last Kirby remaster, so I'm sure there'll be more in the future. And Robobot would be such a great choice. Tomodachi Life is like instant cash for Nintendo, so I expect that we will see them revisit that soon. I don't know what that soon means. I don't know if that means on Switch or Switch 2. I really wish I could tell you more, but that's just, I'm not sure. But I definitely agree that we'll see Nintendo revisit those games in the future. Giancarlo, will Metroid Prime 4 be a standalone plot, or are we going to have another trilogy? That's another interesting question, right? Obviously, I don't know. But I would like to think that Metroid Prime 4 is not the end. I mean, they've put so much investment into this. I think what's likely to happen is that Metroid Prime 4 is like a new beginning for the series. And so I don't know if that means specifically another trilogy. I don't know if they want to lock themselves into that. But I think, I think the wait between Metroid Prime 3 and 4 is going to be a lot, is probably going to be the biggest wait we've seen between Metroid Prime games. And the wait between Metroid Prime 4 and whatever is next in the Prime series, that style of game, will be a lot shorter. I don't want to say it's going to be 2 or 3 years because these are big games. They take time. But of course, if they have a framework already established, maybe they do have a better turnaround. But I do think we could start to see a scenario where we could expect at least one Metroid Prime style game per generation. And the same could be said for 2D Metroid as well. Yeah. Maybe more. But I'm optimistic on spin-offs as well. But let's see how Metroid Prime 4 performs. Let's see how it does, and then we'll have more conversations about what's to come afterwards. But on that note, I will say another 2D Metroid, like, that's for sure got to be happening. Dread was so successful, most successful Metroid game to date. There will definitely be another one, and I would be shocked if they're not already working on it. But the 2D Metroid is the Metroid Prime of a different, like, kind of story arc, so I wouldn't really connect them. Technically, Prime falls within the 2D Metroid timeline, but they could. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some slight retellings or retcons there. Pedro, Prime 2 and 3 remaster still happening? I don't know. My belief or prediction is that we will see Prime 2 and 3 on Nintendo Switch before Prime 4 comes out. I don't think they're going to get the same treatment as Prime 1 Remastered, but I think we're going to get them in some way. That's what I think. I don't know. In the past, Jeff Grubb has heard that Prime 2... I mean, supposedly Prime 2 will come soon, so maybe we see that in a Direct Mini or Nintendo Direct next month. All right, so I haven't had a real opportunity to talk about the actual topic for this live stream, like the main topic. And so let's talk about that. Okay, so basically, Super Metal Dave put out a video yesterday, and he pointed out a number of really cool things. And we talked about some of those things in my video today. So if you haven't seen that, check it out after the stream. But one cool thing he brought up is Edwin Atwell is a software tester, a QA tester, and they've worked on Call of Duty twice, two different Call of Duty games, Call of Duty Vanguard and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. But they've also worked on Metroid Prime 4. That's on their LinkedIn profile listings. I'll literally share it with you right here. And so there's some things I'm going to be showing you guys here that are kind of crazy, right? So here you can see it at Edwin Atwell, right? They worked on these Call of Duty games and Prime 4. Literally, he's saying at Prime 4, right? He provides services in, well, it said software testing, right? I'm a QA tester. There you go, right? Like, so let me go back. All right, and then here we see experience, QA tester at Activision, QA function tester at Activision, right? Different years. And then here, he still has an ongoing contract with Retro Studios. And he's been testing since March 2023. And what's interesting about this date, and I pointed it out in my video today, is that last year, the last day of March, I put out a rumor video that Metroid Prime 4 is complete. Or I think maybe the wording could have been a little bit different there. But Metroid Prime 4 nearing completion, or I understood it as they are QA testing the game already back in March of last year, early March. I sat on it for a little bit because I waited on it to get permission and stuff to even talk about it. And so that information came in March, right? And a lot of people were like, oh, that's bullshit. Well, here we have literal proof that it's not bullshit. They've been QA testing at Retro Studios since March. And so we know Retro Studios is working on Metroid Prime 4. Do you want to make the argument that they are maybe QA testing on a different game outside of Metroid Prime 4? Be my guest. But point is that this is compelling evidence to the rumor that I provided. There are other people, right? But I got permission to talk about it first. Is what I'm trying to say here. And yeah, so rumor is not bullshit. It's legit. They've been QA testing for a while. And so what's cool about that is that it's very much the same as, let me share you this tab, right? Tears of the Kingdom. So we heard that when Nintendo delayed Tears of the Kingdom, they actually, the game, March 2022, the game was pretty much complete from literally Eiji Onuma. So the game was basically done, complete, March 2022. And when we go back to this, right? The rumor was that the game was basically done back in March of 2023, and we have proof here that QA testing started in March of 2023. So that's cool stuff. But that's not what this live stream is about, right? I talk more about that stuff in my video today, right? And then again, in that video, I linked Sumo Dave and his video, which is a whole lot of other cool things brought up there, including, well, I mean, the other interesting point here is that Edwin Atwell, right? He has a history working with Call of Duty, right? So again, that's kind of more supporting the idea that maybe there is multiplayer in Prime 4. He has a history of working, multiplayer games. Maybe there's something there, right? But here's another interesting thing. Share this tab. Okay, so I'm using the Wayback Machine, right? And what you'll notice here, it includes Retro Studios. And so this is a company, Next Gen Dreams. They work with other companies, right? And apparently do a number of things, but the interpretation from Dave in his video is that they may be working on a debut trailer for Metroid Prime 4, as they have done for some of these other companies. Now, it isn't necessarily a debut trailer from what it could be something else, but they are working with Retro Studios according to this. But I am using the Wayback Machine, as you'll notice here, because when we look at the actual public one, the modern day version, Retro Studios is now gone. They took it out. And they took it out after Super Metal Dave put out his video where he shared out this information about Next Gen Dreams having Retro Studios as a client, where they're putting something together for them. And so this is them covering up Metroid Prime 4 news, hence the title. It ain't here, but it is here when we use the Wayback Machine. So, to me, this is pretty crazy. If it's, I guess it's interesting, like, what could they be doing? I kind of assume Dave is right that it could be like a debut trailer, that they're putting together a trailer for Metroid Prime 4. And so that would also imply that, the game could be shown soon, maybe in a direct in February, or maybe in a Switch 2 presentation not too far from now as well. My prediction is that we see Metroid Prime 4 footage by the end of June. That's my expectation. But it's interesting that we see this and now it's gone, publicly. So what are they doing? Why are they hiding that? Is it because it is indeed evidence that they're putting together a big reveal trailer for Metroid Prime 4 and we're going to see that soon? Is it just because they shouldn't be revealing that they're working with Retro Studios yet until the product is out there? And it's not necessarily a debut trailer, but something else? Possible. But it's interesting. It's interesting that they're hiding it. Maybe the Nintendo ninjas caught wind of Dave's video and like, hey, Next Gen Dreams, cut that out. Let's not have that public. This is a big game for us. We want people to be totally surprised. So it's interesting. It doesn't. I don't know what I take away from that besides maybe it adds a little more credence to the idea. The fact that they felt the need to hide it. It's cool. It's very cool. But I'm curious what you guys make of this. So let me pull up the chat again. Let's see here. I'm reading what you guys are saying, so I want to go back. Let's see here. Hey, Nintendo Prime, what's up, buddy? TYG, well, damn, that's so suspicious, right? Kuro Kamina, oh wow. Wily Tiger, makes sense. Having hope, that's crazy. Lino VR6, many ellipses. Jackbot 32, I'm sensing a February reveal. King Frost, it's all good, buddy. Yeah. Well, Brian's in the chat. Jackbot, I don't know if he's still in the chat, but it is interesting that they may have been covering this up. It's very interesting. I don't know if that means a February Direct reveal. Just to clarify, right? Like I sense the excitement, and I'm not trying to shut it down and totally, but I just want to say that it was a big talking point in my video earlier. I don't necessarily think Prime 4 is going to be shown off in a Direct in February. Just so we're clear, right? My estimation, it could be in February. There could be a Direct, and we could see Prime 4. I think that's definitely possible, but I'm not expecting to for sure to see Metroid Prime 4. And like I guess let me rephrase. I believe that by the end of June this year, we will have seen Metroid Prime 4. And so when I say it in that way, what I'm trying to get at is that I see multiple opportunities for Nintendo to show us Metroid Prime 4, but I'm not committed to one particular opportunity. But I think when collectively, out of all the opportunities, we will see it, right? So either in a Direct of some kind of February, in a Switch 2 teaser sometime between now and the summertime, or in a big summer showcase in June. Those are all opportunities where we could see Metroid Prime 4 for the first time. And so of those, I feel good in saying that I think we will see it by the end of June. That's my prediction. And so when I say that, right, I just want everyone to be aware that we could get an Nintendo Direct in February, and it may not include Metroid Prime 4. However, if Nintendo announces a Direct in February, or heck, even if they conceivably could do it tomorrow, I guess, or next week, but probably not, right? It's probably February. If they announce it to be a Direct Mini, definitely do not expect Metroid Prime 4. Like, just don't do it. Don't. That is hard, setting yourself up for disappointment. But if they put a Direct Mini, that's also like a huge like siren alert. Switch 2, news coming soon, right? Like Nintendo won't they won't just do a Direct Mini in February if they have nothing else big to show. Like they're gonna do a normal Direct if Switch 2 is like being saved for later, right? But if a Switch 2 announcement is coming soon, then they'll just do a Direct Mini, I think. And so maybe that's when we see Prime 4, right? But my point is, don't assume we're going to see Prime 4 in February, right? Like, I hope we do. It could happen, but I just want to make that clear. I'm not even necessarily predicting Prime 4 in a February Direct. But who knows? Maybe more evidence will come out that'll change my mind. We'll see. Like, if it's a general Nintendo Direct, again, I'll be a little more optimistic on that. Yeah. Let's see here. I feel like I definitely covered what I want to discuss for this live stream. So this is good. This is like the 10-minute warning, right? I'm gonna call things off so I can go eat food and then pass out so I can get some sleep. I will try and do another live stream later this week where it will be a bigger stream. But yeah, for this next 10 minutes, feel free to ask questions or present ideas, and I'll try and get to them before I'm just completely done. Netweed 09. Technically, you mentioned this before too. The Nintendo surveys for NSO members where Prime 4 was explicitly mentioned were actual official word. Nintendo has acknowledged the existence of Prime 4, right? Exactly. It's not canceled. It's happening. Connor, I mean, hopefully, like the next direct, it would be shocking to see Tamachi Life being ported to Switch, and also adding the new Meme Maker editor in would be awesome. I mean, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? Mr. Real Shane with a super chat. Thank you for the super chat. I just started gaming during the pandemic and fell in love with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I can't seem to find anything else that I love as much. Any recommendations? Okay. Thank you for the super chat again. The good recommendation, right? So I guess the question is, what is it about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that you love so much, and what might help scratch a similar itch? Because you're saying you can't find anything else that you seem to love as much. I guess it kind of depends on... Yeah, again, it depends on what it is about those games that you really love. But I'm assuming it's the adventure aspect, along with the freeness of it. I will say Pokemon Legends Arceus might be a good try. I would maybe look up some trailers on that one. I enjoyed Legends Arceus a lot because it was really fun exploring the big areas and collecting Pokemon in a free way. So that was pretty cool. It has a lot of it feels Zelda-esque. I think Legends Arceus is maybe the best Pokemon game, at least during the Switch era. I mean, I like Scarlet and Violet, but I'm a big Pokemon fan, right? So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but Legends Arceus I think is a really good game. It's a really good game, and not just for Pokemon fans, but for adventure fans. Like, a lot of people who might like Zelda would like Legends Arceus. And so that's one idea. But I see Six Stack brought up Immortals Phoenix Rising. That did come up as well. That is a game made by Ubisoft. It has, like, I haven't played it myself, but it's a fairly... It's considered to be a pretty high quality game. It has a very similar aesthetic to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It has a Greek theme to it, and it's an open world action adventure game. So you might enjoy that one. So that's another one to take a look at. So Immortal Phoenix Rising, Legends Arceus, those are really good options. Another game, if you haven't tried it yet, yeah, I think you should, would be Super Mario Odyssey. I mean, Super Mario Odyssey, it's Mario, right? But there's big areas with huge sandboxes to explore and mess around with. There's a lot of flexibility there. So I think that's something you might also potentially enjoy. So if that's what you're kind of looking for, like, those are possibilities. There is Witcher 3, right? Who brought up Skyrim? Kuro Kamina brought up Skyrim. Skyrim and Witcher 3 are also big medieval RPG open world adventure games. They're more RPG centric, a little bit darker, but they're older, but they're still good. So those are also options as well. Let's see here. Sky Swords Elisa. Or Alyssa. I think it's Alyssa, but I've said Elisa in the past. Or am I confusing them? Feel free to correct me. I know I've gotten it wrong before, and I've tried to correct myself. Asks or says, I hope you're doing well. Besides being tired, I am doing well. Thank you for asking. Just curious, what your thoughts on all these Nintendo trailers dropping? Do you think they are trying to get the small stuff out and give us a banger direct? So this actually happens a lot. Like I've noticed, right? Like, we had the Mario vs. Donkey Kong thing. They're kind of detailing little things. I don't think this really means anything. I think it's simply Nintendo having messaging and marketing out there, because they do that year round. It happens all times of the year, pretty much. Like, we've seen Nintendo put up, for example, here's, like, just because we're talking about Metroid, right? I remember back in 2021, Nintendo had put out a big Metroid Dread overview trailer. It was either like late August or early September, before September Direct, right? That's the main point. And it had a lot of details on Metroid Dread. And Nintendo still had a big moment in the Nintendo Direct about Metroid Dread. Or I think we had an update on Kirby as well early last year, and then we still had a bigger update on Kirby in the Direct. And so I bring these points up just to kind of show that we can get news on Nintendo. We're going to get news on Nintendo games year round, and that doesn't necessarily tell us anything about what to expect in a Direct, even like a couple weeks later or a month later. Another example, we had news coming out throughout June last year, and a lot of people were thinking, "Oh, we're not getting a Nintendo Direct in June. See that here's the news; it's not happening." And then it did happen. It just happened later into the month, and so I wouldn't put too much stock into these little updates we're getting. It's just Nintendo kind of doing their par for the course marketing. They're gonna have announcements year round. That's pretty much it. So let's see here. All right. Noah Doherty with another super chat. Thank you for the super chat. One reason Wii U did horrible is because the name was too similar. Many people just thought it was an add-on to the Wii and had no clue it was its own thing. I'd bet Money Switch 2 won't be the name. Interesting. Okay, so you're coming at this from... Okay, I think this is a very cool perspective you have here. So, on one hand, you can argue that by picking Switch 2, you're making it very clear this is a next generation console. And so this would kind of steer Nintendo clear of the poor messaging problems they experienced with the jump from Wii to Wii U. But what you're arguing is that one of the main reasons why the Wii U did so poorly was because it didn't seem, at least because of the messaging, it didn't seem different enough from the Wii. And so if Nintendo just called it Switch 2, people would be led to believe, oh, it's just more of the same, not really worth buying. And so I think that's interesting. And I honestly, I think that thinking does kind of fall in line with the old school of thought from Nintendo. Hey, let's try something new and refreshing, bring in the audience, have some sort of compelling feature that you could not experience beforehand, and the name would represent that. And so it kind of goes back to the same argument for why Switch 2 makes sense, though. It's just got to be a next generation I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. You could be right. You know, Nintendo may still want to do something to make people feel compelled to buy this console beyond just more power. And so maybe the name represents that. But I don't think the reason the Wii U failed was because, or, you know, I think the whole Wii U naming situation, the issue was people thought it was just an add-on, right? And so it wasn't, I'm not saying that the similarity thing, there isn't some truth to that. I think there is, right? So I think you bring up a good point. I guess what I'm just trying to get at here is that it was a huge problem. A lot of people thought the Wii U was just a tablet add-on to the Wii, which is it's a different thing. Like, that's a very different thing. People understood that the Wii U was providing something different. They just thought it was an add-on. And so not very compelling. They didn't think it was a very compelling thing to buy. But that said, though, I think the point is still valid, right? And it could be the reason why we don't see Nintendo use Switch 2 as a name, because maybe they want to really market this thing as something that sets itself apart from the Switch. That said, pretty much every report we've gotten suggests the system is iterative. That doesn't mean there won't be some features, though, that help this to set itself apart. So we shall see. But definitely a very good point. Let's see here. There is some chats. earlier that I didn't get to. Ricky Lee Norton asked an interesting question. Why do you think Metroid Prime 4 had to restart development? Does it have some huge new mechanic or something like Tears of the Kingdom's new mechanic or what? Yeah, I mean it's also a really good question, right? And I don't I don't know if we'll ever get the answer. I think there's a chance we might. Um, we did kind of get the answer actually. Imran Khan, um, a known industry journalist, um, they're well into the industry. They used to work for Game Informer. Uh, they had put out a few years ago when this news broke that the Metro Prime 4's initial development was being done by different studios, like it was being done in different parts of the world, and so there had to be a lot of like cross communication between different places, and so the implication was that the messaging wasn't very clear, it wasn't very cohesive, and the ultimate end result wasn't something Nintendo was finding satisfactory for what they wanted Metro Prime 4 to be. I mean, Nintendo in a way told us this. They didn't tell us the details, but they did tell us, hey, where we are with development right now is not satisfactory, and we don't think this is going to measure up to the greatness that is the Metroid Prime series. So we're restarting with Retro Studios, and that's kind of what they did. And what's interesting about that is that a part of another rumor that came from Imran Khan that was kind of like supposed like inside knowledge on this stuff was that Retro Studios had pitched a demo of Metroid Prime to Nintendo. They got really excited about it and greenlit the project and also put them on a Metroid Prime 4. Well, we've seen Metroid Prime Remastered. That game, that version of the game looks insanely good for Switch, right? And so playing Metroid Prime Remastered gives me full confidence that Retro Studios has absolutely a great engine in place. And can definitely it's an updated version of the root engine, but it's a really good version of the engine that could absolutely maximize the abilities of the Switch. And I think Nintendo saw that, like, yeah, we need them to make something amazing here. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, it just wasn't high quality, and there's a number of things you could take from that. Maybe it was graphics, maybe it was performance, maybe it was just pace and flow. Maybe it was a combination of things. So, I think that's kind of what it was, right? I don't think it was necessarily like they had this crazy physics engine and they needed to take years to get it right. They had to change they had to restart the project with a new team. So I'm assuming a lot of ideas were just straight up canned. That said, Kensuke Tanabe, still the prime producer, right? So a lot of his ideas, story reasons, maybe even gameplay, like a lot of that, I still imagine will translate over into what this actual Prime 4 project is going to be. Yeah. Let's see here. Going back to I'm trying to get a couple more chats before I close out. AB James. Switch was too PlayStation like that's the main issue. It's just boring, which is unlike Nintendo. And AB James continues. Switch Plus, I still think is the best choice. I remember a few years back, I made a prediction that Nintendo was going to announce the Switch Lite. I was right with the actual name, and that they were also going to have the Switch Pro, and it was going to be called the Switch Plus. And so I thought Switch Plus made a lot of sense because I think that's a good way to convey an improvement. But I don't think Switch Plus necessarily evokes next generation. Of course, we'll see how Nintendo markets things. I'm rooting for Switch 2 Plus though. When the Pro rumors eventually come, right? Switch 2 Plus, here we go. In 2027, here we go. I don't think that's when it would come out, just for the record. Maybe 2028. Yeah, that's pretty. 4 years later, I think that's actually pretty reasonable for a mid-gen refresh. Kuro Kamina, but now how do you separate the Super Switch from Switch Lite or the Switch OLED? See, if you put a 2, it's very easy. Nintendo Switch 2, right? So if it's Nintendo Switch 2 OLED, Nintendo Switch 2 Lite, Nintendo Switch 2 Plus, right? The 2 makes that clear. And so can Nintendo think of a name or phrase outside of just straight digits that tells us, it's next gen? Like, can they use like Greek numerals, like Switch Alpha or Switch Beta? Doesn't sound good. Delta, Switch Alpha, Omega, Switch Orion. It almost sounds like more like code names at that point. Hey, I don't know if you guys remember when I joked around about the Switch 2 name, and I was like, you know what? What about Switch Nova? I like Switch Nova. Switch Nova Lite, Switch Nova OLED, Switch Nova Plus. Maybe. That would require a lot of good marketing, though. I'm very curious. I'm very curious how they'll handle this. Because, I mean, you look at the 3DS, right? Like, maybe looking at the 3DS is a good example. Because they went from Nintendo DS to Nintendo 3DS. And so the numbering there, like, it's very clear, right, that there's something different. So whenever they had a revision, it was 3DS XL, new 3DS. And so people understood it was a 3DS, right? Not a DS. The 2DS thing is where things get, and then the whole new series I hated too, actually. In terms of naming, I like the revisions themselves. I just didn't like the name choices. I'm not sure it's too late for a poll. We'll get more into detail on this. Maybe in the live stream later this week about Switch 2 naming. I'm okay with Switch 2, but I guess I understand that maybe Switch 2 sounds too basic. But that doesn't stop PlayStation from selling well. Also, it's not like it's only a PlayStation thing, right? All sorts of companies just use a number, and people are like, all right, that's it. That's the next thing. We understand. The Elemental Hero, the Shadow Link Dragon, Wolf King. Do you think Bandai is making Metroid Prime 4, or do you think it's a couple of games like Star Fox and Kid Icarus? Bandai is not making Metroid Prime 4. Once upon a time, it was rumored that they were, and I think that they were maybe helping out. Yeah. But I think they're probably working on Smash Brothers and maybe another project, and that other project, not maybe, like for sure another project based off their job hiring postings. And so is that Project Star Fox or is that Project Kid Icarus? I think either or is a good bet. Who knows? Maybe both. Maybe they're working on 3 games: Smash, Kid Icarus, and Star Fox. Wouldn't that be nice? I do think that they're likely working on either Star Fox or Kid Icarus. I think there's a maybe likely is the wrong word, but I think it's a really good bet. I mean, it's got to be some sort of. We know they're working on Nintendo games, and it's probably not just Smash Brothers. So, what other options are there? Maybe that. I guess when you bring up Metroid Prime 4, are you suggesting maybe Bandai Namco could maybe co-developing with Retro Studios to make like multiplayer? Possible, but I would say no. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just, I'm making mental leaps here. TYG, SNS sounds cool though, not gonna lie. Super Nintendo Switch. The SNS. Sounds like NES or SNES. Okay. Maybe I mean it's cool. It's cool. It is cool. Messaging though, will the mainstream understand what it is? That's the big question. And then what do you do after that if you want to follow the same model of Switch? Do you call it Super Duper Switch? Boom Mini with the super chat here. Thank you for the super chat. Here's my support for the evening. By the way, always wanted to know where you got that Zelda poster behind you. The Wind Waker one? I think I got it on Amazon. Yeah, I think I got it on Amazon. If you like Google like Wind Waker stained glass poster, I bet it'll pop up. It's a pretty popular design. I'm searching on Amazon right now. There it is. Yeah, if you search Wind Waker stained glass poster, you will see the design. It's right there. There's a lot of different options. If you mean the other one, I think that one was custom. Friend gave it to me. But it's obviously just like, you know, the Breath of the Wild art, like, you know, on a silk thing, framed. All right, I think I've reached my limit. I'm tired, guys. I apologize. Yes. I think I'm done. I am done, guys. Thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it. Leaving a like is also super helpful. Yeah, I'll be seeing you guys soon. I'll try and do another stream later this week, and it'll be a little bit of a longer one. I'll answer this one last question here. Captain Joe asks, Andres, what does Samus think? Samus thinks it's time to warm up my arm cannon because we're gonna have a lot of work to do soon. But all right, everyone, have a good night. Take care.